3, 2, 1, go.
And welcome into PressBox Live. I'm Stan the Fan Charles of PressBox and PressBoxOnline.com. And with me every Thursday night, sometimes we do Wednesdays, Gary Stein. Gary, how are you, my friend?
Good, my friend. How you doing?
The voice of UMBC basketball and lacrosse, and sometimes Stevenson.
Sometimes
how you doing?
Stevenson.
You're good? You're good?
Yeah, I'm really good. What about you?
I'm really good and happy to be talking to the man we're going to talk to in about 45 seconds, because if there was a day to have our beat reporter, beat writer, Bo Smolka on to talk Ravens, it's the day after the day of the press conference today held by Eric DeCosta and John Harbaugh. But first, let me tell you, you can win big with PressBox and our mobile sports betting partners. That's right. Get thousands of dollars in incentives and promo offers from Barstool, Caesars, FanDuel, and more at PressBoxOnline.com/offers. That's PressBoxOnline.com/offers. And we're also sponsored by Maryland Vascular Specialists. Their team of surgeons is Maryland's leader in ethical arterial procedures. Go to mvsdoctors.com to learn more about their treatments. And of course, my friends at Costas also bring this Zoom to you. We're joined by Bo Smolka, who's covered the Ravens. Bo, how many years has it been in total that you've covered the Ravens, not just for PressBox?
My first year covering this team was 2011. I call it the Cundiff year. And then my second year was the Super Bowl year. So I began covering this year, the team, the year that Cundiff missed the kick at New England. So this is, I think, my 11th or 12th year. I'd have to go back and do the math. But yeah, my first year was the Cundiff year.
Well, I start my questioning with it's hard to believe how fast the time goes from 2012 through 2022. But since that Super Bowl win against the 49ers, I mean, the Ravens appear to be a relevant team pretty much all the time, but they've won just 2 playoff games in 10 seasons.
That is without question one of the criticisms of this organization. And I think it's one of the times when the problems with this team, the fans that want Harbaugh out, and there are certainly some of them.
Yeah.
That is the issue that comes up, is in 10 years, they've won 2 playoff games. And there have been a couple early exits, most notably in 2019 when they were the #1 overall seed. And I'm not sure anyone realistically expected them to win the game this year at Cincinnati without Lamar Jackson.
Yep.
But the bottom line is, to their credit, they were in a position to win that game. And John Harbaugh has more road playoff wins than any coach in NFL history. And you can say, wait a minute, well, that's great and all, but that means they got to go on the road to play in the playoffs, which means they're barely getting into the playoffs. But that's beside the point. They've won playoff games. But to your point, this team has won 2 playoff games since the Super Bowl, and that's been a problem. And of course, now here we are again talking off season again, because the season is already over.
Well, topic number one, needless to say, is Lamar Jackson. I just want your assessment of something. I was writing something recently about an hour ago, and I was writing a friend of mine, and I said, I think they've got kind of a fractured relationship with Lamar right now. And usually when that happens, it takes one party to sort of say, I'm sorry, or, hey, we didn't mean it that way. And again, I'm not there every day, but I don't think the Ravens power couple of DeCosta and Harbaugh and Steve Bisciotti, I don't think they feel like they've done anything wrong. And yet I feel like Lamar is now perceived by a lot of people as the one who's been wronged here. Thoughts?
It's a very tricky situation. There's no doubt about it, because again, today we heard Eric DeCosta and John Harbaugh say, without question, they expect him to be the starting quarterback this fall. John Harbaugh said, I think 200% they expect him to be the long-term answer at quarterback. And yet, until they get a contract extension done, I'm not sure I'm ready to believe that, because there's a lot of issues at play here. And one of them is availability, right? And John Harbaugh has said the best ability in football is availability. and Lamar Jackson's missed 6 games in each of the past 2 years, and he called them freak injuries today, but I think that affects negotiations, right? And so and Eric DeCosta said he called the negotiations a burden. He said that today. This has been a burden on both us and Lamar Jackson, but we think it will get done. That's being optimistic, but that's not necessarily mean it will happen.
Go ahead, Bo. Finish up.
No, I just think that there's a lot of things at play here, and I know that the frustrating thing I think for the Ravens is that the only time we ever hear from Lamar Jackson are these kind of opaque messages we see on social media from him. We haven't heard from him since before he got hurt, and so that's tricky. They obviously would say they want to have him here for the long term. What are they going to do about it? They're going to try to make a contract extension happen, but they have basically 6 weeks before the tag would have to be applied. It hasn't happened in a year and a half. And someone asked Eric DeCosta today, what makes you think after a year and a half it's going to happen in the next 6 weeks? And he said he's optimistic and he thinks it will. I'm not as sold that it will. I think in the end they will have to apply the franchise tag. And then what happens? Once they apply the franchise tag, depending on which franchise tag they apply, they're looking at probably $32 to $45 million on the cap this year for that one player. And I asked Eric DeCosta today, if you do tag him, will you entertain the thought of trading him? Because people have said, well, maybe they'll tag and trade him and pick new draft picks and kind of start over.
Right.
And Eric DeCosta said, we're not going there yet. Our focus right now singularly is on a long-term extension. And that's all well and good. I don't disagree with that. That's their focus, but I'm not convinced it will happen.
Before I turn you over to Gary, I just wanted to ask one thing. Lamar did have communication, and it was last Thursday or Friday where he explained his medical situation. I don't recall ever seeing a player do that. Isn't that normally the sort of the position the club just simply makes a blanket statement? He has not been cleared by doctors. So that's where what I'm talking about with a fractured relationship, why didn't the club sort of take the onus off of Lamar unless they were upset with Lamar?
I just don't think they have all my own opinion, and this is just what I don't hear from any. I just feel like they don't have complete control over what he's going to do, and so he just says, I think he got tired of people saying,
right,
he doesn't want to play, and so I think he's a competitive guy. People have said, oh, do you think he's sitting out for his contract? I personally 100% do not believe that. I think he's a competitive guy. I think he's wired to compete. And I think if he could have played, he would have played. And I feel like he heard all this talk about, oh, he's sitting out for his contract. He's sitting out for his contract. And he wanted to set the record straight on that to more detail than I think the Ravens wish he would have offered. That's my own take on it. But it is very unusual for a player to come out and discuss his injury like that. I can rarely remember that happening.
Eric, go ahead.
Bo, let me ask you. So Greg Roman resigns today. They got to look for a new offensive coordinator. How does that affect the Lamar situation and the offense in general? And by that, I mean, there was a good marriage there for a long time between Greg Roman and Lamar Jackson. The style that Greg Roman likes to use and the style that Lamar Jackson is comfortable in running. But now that Greg Roman is gone, do you see a change in the philosophy of the offense? And if so, how does that affect Lamar?
It's a terrific question. It came up today. People asked John Harbaugh, not about the philosophy, but they asked him about the identity of the offense. And John Harbaugh said the identity won't change. But then he kind of hedged a little bit in the way he described that. I mean, he didn't say our identity is run first and, pass second. His identity was more like, we're going to just try to move the ball, score points, like every other identity. I think it's fascinating, quite honestly, because if you're an offensive coordinator candidate, the first question you're asking is, who's my quarterback for the next year and for the next 4 years? And if you don't know if that's going to Lamar Jackson, then what's the question about that job, right? I'll say this about Greg Roman. Greg Roman was an exceptional run architect for this offense, and there's no doubt about what he was able to produce in this run offense. I think there are always questions about what's the ceiling for that offense in 2020, 2021, 2022, in a time of the NFL where it has skewed in all ways rules and everything else toward the passing game. What's the ceiling for a run-based offense? And it's hard to say we know what that is because Lamar Jackson, of course, has been hurt for the last significant portions of the last 2 years.
I just have to interject. We
Go ahead.
also got Ronnie Stanley after signing his extension, went down with a devastating injury, and their two running backs were hurt all last year. You know, we might be having a very different conversation tonight if those three players hadn't gotten hurt.
Well, not only that, but I mean, if you want to go further just for a second, and I'm kind of getting to the point where does Greg Roman deserve to be fired or not? We can talk about it. He had no receivers, right? If that's not his fault. I mean, they had Tylan Wallace and James Prochet and Sammy Watkins made up 3/4 of the receiving tandem at the end of the season. I mean, you know, he didn't have a quarterback. He didn't have a tackle last year. Barely had one 2 years ago. So, I mean, you know, and we say all that. And the fact of the matter was, if Tyler Huntley doesn't do that stupid thing at the goal line, they actually may have won that game.
They were in position to win that game. There's no question about it. And I think if you want to get on Eric DeCosta for anything of this past year, it is that his assumption that, and we talked to him last spring, and we rarely get to talk to him, but last spring, he basically implied that we've got Rashad Bateman and Devin Duvernay, and we expect James Prochet and Tylan Wallace to make these big jumps. And he also said, why free agent wide receivers want to come to Baltimore because they want to play with Lamar Jackson. And that just hasn't proven to be in any way supported by facts. And the fact is, you know, wide receivers have not come here as free agents until it's a guy like Sammy Watkins or Demarcus Robinson who has been let go by somebody else. And then they come here. And I think it's fair to question whether his assumption or his evaluation of the wide receiver position was fair, because in the end, that turned out to be a huge shortcoming of this team. Last year, of course, they missed all the running backs, and that was kind of a huge mess to the whole year. If you're a run-based offense and you lose all three of your running backs, then I don't know what you're supposed to do to make up for it. But this year, they got Gus Edwards back at one point in this season. They got Kate Dobbins back. He left, and then he came back, and he looked very good. And it's very interesting to say Kate Dobbins was irate after the playoff game that he was not in the game in the key spots at the goal line. And I think that's a fair question as well. But it's for Greg Roman, he was a very good run architect of the offense. But I also think it's very fair to question what the ceiling was for that offense at this time.
Excellent points, Bo. One flip side of this, and I'll let Gary can go where he wants to go, but the one flip side to the coin on this football team as they look ahead, that's got to give them tremendous optimism, is that they have now the makings of a really dominant defense.
They do. And
thoughts?
I mean, Roquan Smith, I think, was an absolutely terrific acquisition. I know they gave up a player and they gave up a second-round pick, which they don't like to part with very easily. And I'll say this, when they traded the Lamar Jackson year, they gave up a second-round pick. The next year, I remember Eric DeCosta saying he was frustrated watching all these good players come off the board in the second round and knowing he didn't have a pick till the third round. So he does not give up a second-round pick lightly. But if you were to tell him you could get Roquan Smith, that guy, for those costs, I think that's a big plus for the Ravens. Roquan Smith has done nothing but validate them making that move. He is terrific. And I know, of course, he got the long-term contract now. I think very quickly that defense is going to be Roquan Smith's identity. That's who he is. And they've got good players around him. They've got good young players up front. They've got Marlon Humphrey to anchor the defense. They got Marcus Williams in the back end. It's a solid defense. And let's face it, they have frustrated today. John Harbaugh said, and Eric DeCosta as well. Our first goal is to win the division. Now, they didn't do it this year, but their first goal is to win the division. What they did do, I will say, what they did do in 3 games against Cincinnati, in all 3 games, they shut down that Bengals offense for the most part. I'll just say this, in 16 games, of course, they didn't play 17 because they had the 1 game canceled. In 16 games the Bengals played this year, only 5 times were they held under 300 yards of total offense. 2 of them were against the Ravens, and the Ravens did it again in the playoffs. So the Ravens seem to have the way to contain the Bengals. Now, the other part of that is you have to score enough points to beat them. You have to get touchdowns when you get to the 1 yard line, and you have to find ways to beat them. But to your point, Stan, the defense is in a very good spot right now and should be for, we like to think, several years.
Well, now we'll see about that, okay? Because you guys are talking about the makings of a great defense. There's a big difference between the makings of a great defense and a great defense, okay? So here's my point. Here's my point. What does the big contract to Roquan Smith do to the roster status of Patrick Queen, to Marcus Peters? Do they have enough money to spend on inside linebackers to invest in Patrick Queen alongside Roquan Smith? Is that an area of investment, or do they let him go? Do they have enough money to re-sign Marcus Peters? So if they don't, and they have to find replacements because there's not enough money, because they need to pay Lamar, the makings of a great defense doesn't necessarily translate to a great defense, because now that defense has holes. So what's your opinion on that?
It's a totally fair point. And this whole thing with the NFL salary cap, it's always a puzzle. Like, where are you putting the money and where are you taking the money away, right? It becomes a big puzzle. It was interesting today. I remember asking Eric DeCosta last year at this press conference, are you going to give the 5th-year option to Marquise Brown? And he said yes. Unequivocally, he said yes. Today, he was asked, are you going to give the 5th-year option to Patrick Queen? And he hedged and said, well, we're going to see what's going to happen with that.
Right.
I think they'd like to keep him, but you're right. I mean, it comes down to dollars. Marcus Peters, Eric DeCosta said Marcus Peters was one of his all-time favorite players. If you ask me today, I don't think Marcus Peters will be back here next year, because
I don't think so either.
I don't think they will be willing to pay him what Marcus Peters will want. And I think they will look to their younger corners that they have brought in to take Marcus Peters' place. And it's a fair question. Say, well, yeah, you pay some people, you can't pay other people. I remember Matthew Judon saying before he was a free agent, saying you can't pay everybody. And Eric DeCosta said effectively that today. So yes, you've paid Roquan Smith, but does that mean you lose Marcus Peters? Maybe. Does it mean you lose Patrick Queen? I don't know, but maybe.
Right.
And you might lose Chuck Clark. Chuck Clark could be a cap casualty. And if you lose Chuck Clark, just Kyle Hamilton, who has turned out to be underrated almost slot safety / cornerback. But if you lose Chuck Clark, does Kyle Hamilton move to a more traditional safety? And if you do that, now who's that slot corner that was Kyle Hamilton? So there's always additions and subtractions, and it's never easy, but I understand your point, but I think Roquan Smith was a guy they had to retain.
Tell me, Bo, tell me what kind of impact do you expect from David Ojabo next year?
I think David Ojabo, he's a 2nd-round draft pick that people viewed as a first-round
talent. Yeah.
I would expect him to have a huge impact next year. Now, I'll say this. I also expected Afe Owe to have a huge impact this year, and I was disappointed with what they got out of him this year. But Ojabo is a guy who they didn't think was ready till roughly Thanksgiving or even a little bit later. And he got a little bit of work. He made the nice sack in the last game of the regular season against Cincinnati. But I would think he will be a guy that'll be a top of the rotation guy in terms of their edge rush, pass defense kind of guy. I think they don't draft him in the 2nd round expecting him other than a huge impact guy. So I think they acknowledge that this year would almost be a quasi redshirt year for him, but I absolutely expect them to see more from him next year, like as a big impact guy.
Yeah.
And let me just talk about the defense again for just a second. Even if they have a great defense, let's say they figure it out and the Swiss cheese holes all get filled in and it all works out, okay? Bo, in today's NFL, as opposed to 10 years ago in the NFL, okay, can great defense and so-so offense actually win in the playoffs when you're going to face teams that have quarterbacks like Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes and Jalen Hurts maybe even, gets to that level eventually? Like, is that the right combination in today's NFL? Or do we have to grow up offensively?
You can say 10 years ago. I was thinking more like 30 years ago, right? I
Okay.
mean, what the Ravens want to do is be like Jim Kick and Larry Zonka and just barrel the ball up the middle against you and keep your quarterback on the field for 10 minutes. That's what they want to do.
Yeah, but there's no Paul Warfield there.
Right. And in fact, they did that against Cincinnati, though, right? They left Burrow. They had a 10-minute scoring drive against Cincinnati. And that's what they want to do. Can you do it in today's NFL? I question it. I've often thought, you're not going to, I don't think you're going to win. I'll say this. I watched that Bills Chiefs playoffs game last year, the wild one that ended, and back and forth and back and forth. And I sat there going, I just don't see this Ravens offense going toe to toe with these teams. And so what has to change for that to happen? I mean, John Harbaugh likes to say they have this revolutionary offense and they're going to zig when everyone zags. And that's all well and good. But I think I question the ceiling for it. I do. And maybe they do too. And maybe that's why they decided to make a change with Greg Roman. But the question is, I think the fascinating question is what comes next at offensive coordinator? If you're a candidate for offensive coordinator right now, the first question you're asking is, how long is my quarterback going to be here? And who is do I have Lamar Jackson for 5 years? I hope you're not tagging him and trading him in May. That we don't want that. But I think you have to be able to have an adequate passing offense to win in this league at this time. And this Ravens team did not have an adequate passing offense.
No question about it. Gary, go ahead.
Okay, me. Yeah. So what's that?
Yeah, you.
Oh, okay.
You.
Me.
I love you. I love you. I like beer.
Speaking of the defense. Okay. Speaking of the defense, assess Mike McDonald's coordinatorship this year.
I think it took him a little bit to grow into it, and I think it took his players a little bit to grow into it. And I think part of that was, we talk about those first couple games, the Miami game, the Buffalo game, or the Miami game, of course, really sticks out for just being an absolute colossal collapse, where they just gave up the 3 touchdowns, 30, I think all the points late. And you had Kyle Hamilton. If you remember that game specifically, Marcus Peters wasn't playing yet. Marlon Humphrey went out. They had a rookie, Jalen Armour Davis, playing on the outside in that game. Kyle Hamilton hadn't quite figured it out, and they were scrambling. And they were exposed for who they were at that time, which was a bunch of inexperienced players. And it was just a terrible time for that game to happen. And as the season wore on, Hamilton got much better. Peters got healthier. And everybody seemed to get more comfortable in McDonald's system. And I'll go back to what I just said. Watching Mike McDonald's group against Cincinnati 3 times, I thought they played really, really well against Cincinnati. And if the offense had done enough, all 3 of those games were winnable. And I know they lost the one game by 11, and they lost the one game on the goofy fumble return touchdown. But the defense did enough to win all those games. So I thought the defense, as it went on over the course of the season, I thought McDonald did a nice job figuring out the best way to use Kyle Hamilton, who's kind of is he a safety? Is he a slot guy? Who is he? What can we do with him? And they started blitzing him more. And he told me he was never really a blitzer in college, but he was an effective blitzer for the Ravens. I think that was one thing that McDonald tapped. So I think over time, I think the defense grew into McDonald and vice versa. So I'm kind of encouraged by what we saw from them over the last, say, weeks 9 to 17, that's going to improve going forward.
So that receiver position, Vinny Serrato, who knows a thing or two about football, he asked a question, but you could tell the way he was asking the question that he meant like sort of, why don't you go out and get a number one receiver in a trade? But can you afford that? And could you discuss Eric's answer to that?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I think fans will be kind of discouraged by Eric's answer to that. Eric's answer that was basically, we know what the fans want,
Yeah,
but there's only so much money to go around. And if we have to pay the quarterback or the inside linebacker, we have to pay the tackle and we have to pay the cornerback, we're not going to have any money to sign wide receivers. And it sounded as if his answer was, we're not going to chase free agent wide receivers, which is the last thing for fans want to hear.
right.
Because Vinny's point.
But he did reference the fact that you got to be creative with it.
He did, and I think there are ways to be creative with it. But if the team comes back next year with creative being a Las Vegas cast off like DeMarcus Robinson or
Right.
a Green Bay cast off like Sammy Watkins, I don't think fans are going to be into that. I
No.
mean, could you trade for one? Absolutely. That might be what he's talking about. Maybe again.
Well, that's what I think.
Depends on
that's
what
actually, I think that's what Vinny was alluding to.
part of it.
Like
but
the
right, part
trade
of
that
it comes,
the trade the Eagles made to get Brown from the Titans.
right. I mean, you can trade. Trading would certainly be a possibility, and part of it becomes what happens if you change your offensive approach. I mean, they right now have basically 4 tight ends. Do you move one to try to package one of those into a wide receiver thing? I mean, I think trading for a wide receiver would be one thing. I do question. I think it's always fair to question. And I know Eric DeCosta, 2 years ago, we asked him, like, why would free agent wide receivers want to come play in this offense? Now, again, now we've suddenly got this huge question mark because Greg Roman's not here anymore. So what is the offense going to look like? But in a run first offense, why would a free agent want to come here? And Eric DeCosta at the time had said, free agents want to play with Lamar Jackson. He's dynamic. He's fun. He's great. Everyone wants to play with him. I wasn't sold then. I'm not sold now. But if you're going to change the offensive approach, maybe free agents will want to come here. More likely, you can be creative, as he said, and maybe trade for one. Whether that costs you a player and a pick or picks for the player, I don't know. But I think they do have to be creative, but it did sound as if the way he described it, they are not going to be chasing free agent wide receivers with big money because they don't have it. And if they're going to add wide receivers, and both he and John Harbaugh said that was a room that had to get fixed. So they acknowledge that the wide receiver position is not as good as it needs to be, which is absolutely apparent to anyone that watched this team. Trading would be a way to do it, where you just move players or you move draft picks to get someone. They only have 5 draft picks this year, though, so I don't think they want to move any draft picks this year. Whether you take a player and a future pick to try to get a player, that would be one way to do it. But as I said, as Eric DeCosta said, maybe you try to be creative in ways to do that.
Gary, you got a last question for
How solid is the footing under John Harbaugh, Bo?
You know, it's so interesting because we don't ever hear from Steve Bisciotti anymore. I will say the only thing not the only thing, the most kind of consistent thing we've heard from Steve Bisciotti over the years is he believes in the value of continuity. And I think I agree. He is not a guy that's going to he often has made reference to the fact that when you see these franchises struggling, it's often because they keep making changes. And I think he believes in John Harbaugh. I think he understands where things are, but I do think he places a high value in continuity. And so I think when he looks at this organization, Ozzie, Eric, now John Harbaugh, I believe there's a high premium on continuity. And so how solid is his footing? I think for now it's pretty solid. They were a playoff team again. I know things happen, and Harbaugh can always say, well, we didn't have a quarterback or whatever. But I do think Steve Bisciotti values continuity. And so I think the footing is fairly solid.
You know, one of the Steve Bisciotti's favorite coaches was Gary Williams. He loved Gary's arrogance, his defiant nature, and I think he loves that about John Harbaugh.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean,
But-
Harbaugh certainly has some of that. He's got a little stubbornness to him. He's
Yeah,
got a
no
little,
question about
we're
it.
gonna get it, and yeah, I can see him liking that streak in him for sure.
Yeah, and he also probably liked the way he treated Melissa Stark the other night. Uh, Bo Smolka, it's a pleasure. You did a great job this year for Press Box. Many thanks for coming on with us tonight.
Hey, yeah, you know, let me just say one thing about how we treated Melissa Stark.
Yeah,
Look, Melissa Stark has every right to ask that question,
right.
and John Harbaugh has every right to decline to answer it. So, you know, I don't.
It's not the declining of the answer. It's those things. You know, it reminded me of the Brent Harris situation back in an exhibition game
Yeah,
about
that was lowercase.
6 years ago. Where, you know, just answered a question. She wasn't trying to get an "I gotcha" moment. She's asking a question that probably some people told her to ask. You know.
Okay, that's true, but I mean, look, I'm
Look,
big- I'm not a big
wait a
fan.
minute, Gare, hold on 1 second. If they did away with those in-game interviews, I'd be the first one to say, thank you very much.
I'd be
nothing.
Stan. I'd be the second one.
They add
Look, it's
nothing
kind of
to
my
the,
point.
they add
You know,
nothing
here he
to the
is.
broadcast.
Here he is in the middle of a playoff game where he's got his third string quarterback playing. He can, you know, right,
He had
and
a
that guy's
second,
got a
he had a
bad
second
shoulder.
string. He had a
Second string, whatever. And that guy's got a bad shoulder, and the other guy can't play either, and whatever. And he's trying to win a playoff game, maybe save his job, maybe save Greg Roman's job. Who the hell knows? I mean, those interviews are stupid, for lack of a better term. You know, what are you
Just
really
go
going to
along,
get from
just
this?
go along with stupid. That's all. That's all. Don't make her look bad. That's all.
Oh, I don't think
She looked
I
bad.
don't think she looked bad at all. I don't think she looked bad. I think what she did was fair.
Yeah,
And
John was the
Out
one.
there.
Who
Once it started, when that interview started, I had said to my family, we're watching the guy, I said,
This
John
is gonna-
Harbaugh hates these interviews. And then it came out, but no, I don't think Melissa Stark looked bad at all.
No, she didn't actually.
Totally fair.
No, she did. I mean, look, Harbaugh looked bad.
He
okay?
looked bad.
Exactly.
He looked
But-
bad.
but-
He
but
looked
think
bad.
about
I
the
mean, he
circumstances.
looked like he didn't want to be there. And quite frankly, I don't think any NFL coach wants to be there. And the NFL,
That's what I'm saying.
the NFL
Hey.
says you have to do it. And
Hey.
maybe there's more civil ways to do it. But, you know, Melissa Stark, to her credit, she didn't look bad.
No,
in
she
my
didn't
mind
look
at
bad.
all.
You're right. You're right. You guys are both right about that. Hey, I got you here. Let's give our predictions at this point. We're down to the next round of who are we going to see in the Super Bowl? Gary, I'll start with you.
I mean, look, it's either going to be Kansas City or Buffalo in the American Conference. I'm going to go with Kansas City, and in the NFC, I think I would take San Francisco. So I think they met a couple of years ago. I'll take KC and San Francisco to go all the way.
Bo, who you like?
I'll take the Chiefs. You know, it's interesting. I'll say this, as long as we're on this discussion, since you brought it up. I think, you know, I know fans have been complaining about the Bengals. I think the Bengals have a legitimate beef here about this game being in Buffalo this weekend. Because if you go back and look at it with the Bengals-Ravens game, the question was, if that suspended game happened and the Ravens won, then what if? And then they extrapolated that and said, oh, we might have a coin flip. And if this happens, what if? But they never did that for if the Bengals-Bills game happened and the Bengals won.
That's
what
true.
if?
Yeah.
They never did. They said, well,
Yeah.
you guys have both played 60 games, so we'll call it that.
Right.
And if I were the Bengals, and they're saying, well, wait a minute. Well, what if we won? If the
Right.
Bengals had won that game, then they're the 2 and the Bills are the 3. And that's
Right.
a huge deal. And
It is a huge deal.
and the league said, no, we'll consider for this case and for that case, but not for that case.
Can that chip on the shoulder make up for the losses on the offensive line with the Bengals?
Well, it's a fair question, right? And I do think the Bills are better, and I think at home the Bills will win. And I think the Bengals will be salty about having to go there for that game. I like the Bengals overall. I think they're a good team, but I think the Bills will win, and I think the Chiefs will end up winning the AFC. I think they're the best team. I'm
And
going
how
to
about
go.
NFC?
I'm going to go with the Eagles. I'm not convinced on them, and of course with Hurts we don't know. And I know the 49ers. It would be wild. Would it not be wild if a Mr. Irrelevant leads his team to the Super Bowl?
Absolutely.
Are you kidding me? This would be the craziest thing ever.
Well,
Biggest thing since Tom Brady.
At the
Right.
end of the day, that's why I don't think San Francisco makes it. I think Philadelphia's defense will figure a way to contain Mr. Purdy a little bit, although
Possible.
49ers are a terrific team. I
It's
like Philadelphia.
fascinating.
I like
Very well balanced.
Philadelphia probably against Kansas City or Buffalo, probably.
Yeah, I'm going to take Philly and the Chiefs. It's kind of boring, but I look at the 49ers and I say that is such an amazing story. But and if that guy takes his team to the NFC to the Super Bowl, that would be just unbelievable. But
Hey, did you guys both notice that our old friend Jimmy Schwartz is going to be with the Browns?
Yeah,
That's
defensive
hey,
coordinator.
see him
Good
twice
for
a
him.
year, twice a
Yeah.
year.
Pride,
All right.
pride,
Hey,
pride of
Bo,
our
are you still doing your podcast with Daniel Wilcox, or is that over for the season now?
We're doing one tomorrow morning. We're going to talk about. We're gonna record it tomorrow morning. It will air it probably tomorrow afternoon on the Believe Network, BLEAV.com. We're going to discuss the Greg Roman hiring or firing or walking away, if as it were, and what comes next at offensive coordinator, and then more speculation about Lamar Jackson, which, quite honestly, after 6, 12, 18 months starts to get old. But there's
I mean, what more are
goes
you
from
going to
here,
add
but
at this point?
What's the name? What's the name of your podcast with Daniel?
it's Believe in the Ravens on the Believe
Believe
LEAV podcast network. So
All right.
Daniel Wilcox has a really good insight as a guy who played for this team, and he worked for a year or at least a training camp in the front office with the scouting department. So he was involved, and he kind of has a read on Joe Ortiz and Eric DeCosta and some of those guys. So he's always got good insight. And I know he was critical in some ways of Greg Roman, so I haven't talked to him yet since we decided to do one tomorrow morning. I'm curious to see kind of what where do they go from here? Do they get another guy that is RPO based, or do they say, you know what, let's blow this revolutionary offense up and let's go back to where we're a throwing team? And if so, what does Lamar Jackson and this offense look like? And more importantly, who's catching the ball? And I think that's something the Ravens themselves have to be thinking about over the next 2-3 weeks.
He is Bo Smolka. He covers the Ravens for PressBox and PressBoxOnline.com. He is Gary Stein up top there. Gary, thank you very much. And I'll let everybody know that we have been brought to you by the Costas Inn. The Costas Inn has been around for over 50 years. That's longer than John Harbaugh has been the coach of the Ravens. And during those 50 years, they've been giving people impeccable service, great food. During the pandemic, they've upped their carry-out or curbside pickup game. All you have to do is go online to costasin.com. You can order on your computer. You can order online. You can pay for it online, but you do have to pick it up in person, but you don't have to get out of your car. And everything is packed immaculately. So we thank the Costas Inn for sponsoring these Zooms. Again, for Bo Smolka, Gary Stein, I'm Stan the Fan. I'll be back Monday night with Matt Blood, and we'll talk then. All right, bye.